Our first presentation of the day is the Starry Expanse Project. For anyone who does not know the Starry Expanse Project, it is a real-time 3D recreation of Riven. Tough. This is Iman. He will be giving the presentation. Would you like the... One moment.
Yeah, I just need the laptop up here.
Any second.
You can flip it on now.
Good?
Yes. Awesome. Good morning, everybody. We are so excited to be here. So my name is Iman Rastagari. I'm a part of the Starry Expanse team. I joined the team in 2012, and this is my first time in Spokane. And we were talking earlier about how, for some of us, we grew up playing Myst and Riven, and we knew the name Spokane, and actually being here is a little surreal. So it's very exciting. I want to talk a little bit about what Starry Expanse is for those of you who don't know. As Tana said, we are recreating Riven from scratch for modern systems, so in full real-time 3D. The project was started in December 2008 by Philip here and Zib. And we have been working over the last 11 years to constantly improve our pipeline and our organization and work to just collaborate as effectively as possible. And that's tricky because our team is a group of volunteers who are spread across the world, and most of us have never met each other before. So it's a really unique game development challenge. But we're really proud of the work that we've done so far, and we're excited for what's to come. So where are we right now? We are in Spokane. So a lot of people are curious about our pipeline and what that looks like, and we're going to be going much more in depth on that today. But just to kind of give a quick overview before we do that. So we use a variety of software tools. We work in Maya, 3ds Max, Blender, Substance, Photoshop, and a lot more. We build the game in Unreal Engine 4, and we're currently developing our version of Riven for PC, Mac, Linux, and as of last year, we officially announced that we are going to be bringing VR support to it as well, which we are super excited about. And all areas of the game are in development, which is pretty cool. So today is a very special Mysterium, and it's the 20th anniversary of Mysterium. We're here in Spokane in Cyan's backyard, but like I mentioned before, the Starry Expanse team is spread across the globe, and this is the largest gathering of Starry Expanse team members in person ever. And so we wanted to celebrate that and do something a little bit different for our presentation today. And I want to invite the rest of my team members who are here right now. There's at least one other person who is going to be coming in later tonight. But we have a bunch of people here today, and I want to invite all of you to come up here, and we're going to do it a little bit panel style. And we're going to talk about not only what we're working on, but why we work on it the way that we do and how we go about doing it, and lean on the expertise of all of the incredible collaborators that we have on our team. So why don't you guys come on up? So here's who everybody is, but I want to grab a mic and have everybody just quickly run down the line and introduce themselves, say their name, where they're from, on the table. Awesome, right here.
Hi everyone, my name is Kyle Hovey. I'm from Murphy's, California, and I'm a system administrator for the Starry Expanse Project.
Hello, I'm Hollister Steritz. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm the audio director, composer. I help out with web design, and I manage the community, like the Discord and things like that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly. And I do all sorts of stuff. I started on the team as a 3D modeler, and Yeah, come on. It's good. I started doing 3D modeling. I am terrible at camera matching. I'm iffy at texturing. I do animation. I do a lot of level building, business stuff. I'm also on the committee, as you may have noticed, so I liaise between Mysterium and the team and kind of make sure all the things are done and all sorts of fun stuff.
Hello, my name's Nick Moa. I'm from Adelaide, Australia. It's taken a long time to get here.
This is the first time any of us have met Nick in person, and we are so psyched that he is here.
And I've been part of the team for 8 years or so now, and so I haven't met any of you until yesterday. Yeah, and so I am an artist. I focus on art direction, and so I lead a lot of that art development. Is it plugged in? I'm talking? Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, sorry. I also do a lot of the admin stuff, which sounds boring, but no, it's really sexy. It's really good.
It's hard to top that. I'm Phil. I'm on the project. We started it about 10 years ago, so this has been a time long coming. We're really excited for this year. This is the biggest crowd we've ever had. Thanks for coming. I do a lot of the programming and some of the engine stuff, project management. It's pretty boring. It sounds boring. It's so fun.
So as you can see, our team has a ton of talents, and it's a real team effort. Lots of people jumping in on lots of different levels. So something that we get asked a lot is, how do you actually go about recreating a game like Riven from scratch? And so I wanted to talk through some different aspects of our pipeline. So over here on the left are a sequential set of steps that we have to go through. So the first step is camera matching, which is not something that most video games have to do. So Nick, could you tell us a little bit about, oh, by the way, so we're doing this panel style, I'm gonna be asking some questions. I know what they know what to talk about, but they don't know what I'm going to be asking them, which is a lot of fun. So, Nick, so what is camera matching and how do we go about doing it?
Okay, so camera matching is taking the still images from Riven. So we've got these set locked positions, and so they represent points in 3D space from the original Riven environment. So we're trying to recreate that environment by figuring out exactly those positions. And so we use sort of key things in the environment, usually straight lines, hard edges, that kind of thing, 90-degree angles, and we try to triangulate from multiple perspectives to get those points, and then extrapolate from that to get the environment. Is that good?
Perfect, thank you. So Kelly, you actually introduced level blocking into our pipeline. Could you tell us a little bit about why that was important to you and how that manifests itself?
Yes, because basically what was happening, as Nick was talking about the camera matching, and we would match, say, like this room, and get the walls placed, we have the windows, we have the doors, we would have the chairs, and everything would be super simple, like nothing was very detailed, the models were not finalized. That would then be passed on to the modeling team. So they would model the mesh of the chair, and they would get the curtains all fancy, but nothing was being done in the engine. And so one of the pieces of the pipeline that I added was once the blockout was done, I would put that blockout into the engine. And so you're walking around a room, and it's a very simple room. There's no curtains. It's just you're seeing the proportionally accurate models for all the different pieces. And then as models were being fleshed out, they would then be placed, and we would already know where they go because we had everything already camera matched. And so, yeah.
Awesome. So when it comes to modeling and texturing, Philip, you have a bit of an interesting perspective on this, having co-started the project. You have seen all of the different iterations that our modeling and texturing has gone throughout the years. Could you just give us a quick overview of what modeling and texturing are?
Sure. So modeling, I guess the whole premise is that if you have a detailed environment, you can't physically represent every atom in the computer and have it like render every single atom because there'd be way too much. So simplify everything down. So you have a circle, you just represent that as like a 25-sided polygon, for instance. And so with modeling, you just like take a natural-looking shape and you turn it into triangles. And somehow, like how you create the triangles, that's the whole problem of modeling. And once you have those polygons, you need to get them to look good. Otherwise, it's just a flat shaded object. So we got map textures, which are just images, really. And it used to be that you would just map the image, and that would just be the end of it texturing. But now that we have Unreal, which has physically based rendering, which is like, it tries to be a little bit smarter about the different things that an object is made of. So you can specify, oh, this is going to be metal, and it's this amount shiny. It's also, or maybe it's glass, and you want to say, oh, it's exactly this transparent, and it's exactly this refractive. So it can you can kind of say, oh, this is like thicker glass than that other glass. And so that's why we need all the textures, is so that we can tell it, oh, these are the like parts of the metal that are kind of rusty and rough, whereas the rest is more shiny and should reflect more. And so for any given object, we might have 4 or 5 textures. Does that sound about right? Or maybe 3 to 5?
Well, our usual pipeline has so three textures: a diffuse texture, so what color it is, so and we'll talk about what base color it is. So without any like specular reflection or lighting or anything, just what is its base color. And then we have what we call a PBR texture, which is physically based rendering, which is what it's made of, so whether or not it's metallic or not, because that really changes how an object will look. How rough it is, so how reflective or specular it's going to be, and then a ambient occlusion texture as well, which is handles self-shadowing. That looks a lot prettier.
So as you can see, these steps need to go in order, right? We need to know what's in a scene, how big everything is, what the shapes are, and we do that through camera matching. Then we block it all out so that we know where everything goes, and then we actually create those objects in modeling and then make them look pretty and like actual real-world objects through texturing. But there are a bunch of other things that we do as well, and so these parts of our pipeline run in parallel. So when it comes to animation, Kelly, can you tell us a little bit about some of what animation looks like for things, for example, like doors and levers and buttons, which there are a few of in Riven?
And those are the ones I'm good at animating. So when we take an animation and when we're camera matching a still image, it's very different than camera matching an animation. So if we're camera matching a door animation, what we do is we take the original video and we break it down into individual frames, and we bring that into 3D modeling, and we match frame by frame a door swinging open, which for doors and levers, it's pretty easy. And that can happen at the same time as modeling, texturing, all that stuff, because the animation is happening on a different level than the actual model itself. It's kind of hard to explain, but does that answer?
That's wonderful. Does
Awesome.
that answer? Yes?
Yeah.
All right, great.
Awesome, okay.
So now we come to lighting. Nick, can you tell us a little bit about what lighting a world like Riven looks like, and why is it necessary?
Lighting Riven is really tricky, because the way I would normally light a scene in Unreal is I would figure out where the sun is, where the dominant light is going to be, and I'd put that in the scene, and then I would, what we call bake lighting, is get the engine to compute all the different bounces and the ambient light and everything from that one dominant directional, and then I would see what it looks like, and then I would add other lights to fit, like where like light switches, where like fire marble stuff would go. The problem with Riven is that everything's already lit in the final game, which means all the textures and stuff have all their lighting like baked in. So when you look at a screen from Riven and you go, well, that looks orangey grey, cool, I'll make the texture orangey grey. But what you're looking at you're looking at the base color plus the lighting. So what I try to do before I even start lighting the scene is take the entire scene and kind of desaturate it a little bit based on what I think the color of the light was, and then I add light back in and then bake. And so, yeah, it's a work in progress. It's a pretty unique problem to have, I think.
And you guys can imagine how tricky that would be, for example, in a space like 233, right, which has a very dominant color scheme that's coming from that light. So,
Yes.
Yes. So we've been talking a lot about things that you can see, right? When you're playing the game, you see the models, you see where they are, you see what they look like, how the lighting interacts. But in order to make all of it work in a way that you can play it, there's a lot of programming that goes underneath. Philip, can you tell us a little bit about what that part of the process looks like?
Sure. Well, what's interesting about this?
You can give us some examples of
Yeah.
of things that need to be programmed.
Well, so I guess one of the most interesting or fleshed out parts of the programming is that Riven is obviously a very interconnected environment. So you've got a lever over here that influences a submarine over there. You've got a wheel on one island that affects whether a bridge is raised or extended on another island. And so there's a lot of interplay between the different levels. And so you can't exactly talk to a bridge that doesn't exist in terms of code. So we have a system that kind of represents the state of the entire world. And that is kind of a single source of truth, as we call it in programming, that lets the individual objects, they don't actually talk to each other. So when you flip a lever, it doesn't talk to anything else. It just talks to the single source of truth. And that changes the state of the world. And that triggers updates for everything else. Sounds really weird to talk about, right?
I think we're getting really philosophical here, right? It's just what is the one state of truth in our world? I love it. So, and then tying everything together is the audio. And as we all know, the audio in Riven is really intricate and really sets the scene. So Hollister, tell us a little bit about some of the things that you take into account when building out the audio in Riven.
Right, so I sort of, over the years, have developed my own pipeline that's, while separate from the one on the left, sort of relies on some things here and there. For example, I'm not going to, usually I won't make a sound for an animation before it's animated, so it's not just like it's completely its own thing, but I sort of have a process I go through because we're using the original sounds from the game in real time. They're designed to be listened to in a two-dimensional context, so to get them to work, when you're moving your head around is a bit of a challenge in some cases because, excuse me, my throat is dying. I'm so sorry. Oftentimes there will be built-in reverb effects or something like that will make it, if you have it coming from a fixed point, sound very strange when you turn your head, and it's like, oh, well, it's just reflecting here. That's weird. So a lot of my initial part of the process is using spectral editing and a lot of different things to try to equalize out the. Thank you. You are an angel. Bless you. Will be to try to get out a lot of the sort of effects that are baked into it so that I can pretty much reapply them in real time, similar to what Nick was talking about with the colors. So once I've got the sound edited to my liking, then I'll put it into the engine, and that's when the real fun stuff happens because I get to play around with a lot of different real-time features that we've been experimenting with, like occlusion, for example. So, for example, if you're in the maglev room on Survey Island, and the maglev's making its loud sound, and then you go through the door and you close it behind you, it'll sound more muted. It'll use like what's called a low-pass filter to make it sound like it's not directly next to you but coming through a wall, things like that. And then we use real-time reflections to make the sounds more spatialized around you, so it sounds like it's to your left, and you can even tell when something's above you and below you now because of the algorithms we've been using. So I can go more into that later, but that's in a nutshell what I've been doing.
Awesome, thanks. And so while all of this pipeline is going on, we need to be able to communicate with each other, and we need to be able to collaborate as effectively as possible. And so that's where system administration comes in. So Kyle, can you tell us a little bit about the tools that we use to effectively communicate and keep work flowing?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a team that's distributed across the entire globe, obviously we need very good communication software and methods of collaborating with not only the code, but also the assets of the game and this really awesome pipeline that we have set up. So me and our other sysadmin, Chris Mumford, we've set up a lot of open source solutions that have enabled the team to do all of these things, one of which being Mattermost, which we're running on Amazon Web Services. And we use Git for all of our code tracking and SVN for all of the assets in Unreal, and combine those two in a bunch of fun ways. And also have a whole wiki set up so that when we need to onboard new members of the team, it's a very streamlined and standardized process, so that when we are working through the motions of everything we do, it can go smoothly, and hopefully the work that we do goes unnoticed, because if it does, then there's usually a problem, and we need to go fix it. So that's what I do. Thanks, Ethan.
Awesome. So that's how it comes together. But what's an example of how we might put this pipeline into effect? And so I wanted to talk today a little bit about Survey Island. And I have a video of something that we created here. And that's our demo for today, ladies and gentlemen. So, all right, so let me go to the next slide if we can. There we go. There we go. All right. While this is loading back up. For those of you who haven't seen this, this was our April Fool's Day post, and we actually have a playable demo of this 2.5D Survey Island. It's incredible. If you haven't tried it, check it out. StarryExpanse.com, download it, it's great. Hollister was one of the masterminds behind this. So. Hollister, can you tell us a little bit about just where the idea came from and some of the things that went into it?
Yeah, totally. So, if my throat will behave. So, originally the idea came from Stuart and I. He's the other one who worked on this with me. He did most of the art. I did the sounds, and we sort of split the programming and animation. We wanted to learn a new engine. We wanted to learn There's some debate over how it's pronounced. I say Godot. Some people say Godot. I don't know. But it's a 3D and 2D game development suite that we decided to learn to make a little short game. And we also thought it was a good way to show off things that wouldn't otherwise be easy to show off, because we had just blocked out this entire Survey Island. We had all these models done, but just showing them on their own doesn't look that impressive. So we thought, hey, we're two birds with one stone here. And it was a fun way to engage with the community. We had a whole Easter egg hunt where we had things hidden in the game. That's a spoiler. Come on. That was sort of the main motivation for it.
Awesome. I particularly love the pop-up ads at the bottom.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's also worth noting that Hollister and Stuart deliberately hid this whole thing from me. It was a separate chat, separate repo for the files, because they knew I would have shut it down if I'd known.
That may or may not be true.
And so this is silly, right? But this actually allowed us to, it was actually really helpful for our team in a few key ways. Philip, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, anytime you have a big project where people are constantly joining and getting onboarded, and it's such a huge project like this that has such a long timeline, people are going to be wanting to learn the systems like programming, modeling, getting things into the engine, getting things working. So it's always important to have like little, achievable projects, whereas Riven is kind of just like this huge monument. It's achievable, but it's a very long time scale, and we need something more digestible. So it's always good to have these little side projects. Keep the energy alive.
And this little thing, but it also really much helped us learn some valuable lessons about project management and a lot of little things here and there, about, through trial and error, about what, little things that we actually ended up applying to the main project, how to work better with each other, how to make sure that changes, get carried through when multiple people are working on something. Because, when we have only 2 people working on it for a tight deadline, there are going to be conflicts. You have to really learn how to work with each other to make sure that you're not always you're never working on the same thing,
Yeah.
same files.
So again, download it if you haven't tried it. It's a lot of fun. So when it comes to Survey Island, it is hard to top that experience. We thought about just putting that in the game, and that's going to be Survey Island. But we're doing our best to live up to the hype of that. And so Philip is going to switch over the demo here. And Philip is going to walk us through an area of Survey Island that we've been working on. That'd be good.
The mic.
We're just gonna have to live with that box in the corner. Okay. All right. So here we are in Survey Island. You may recognize this scene. We've got a pretty maglev. This looks amazing in VR, by the way. Be sure.
So as Philip mentioned, this space, in addition to being developed in flat screen version that you're seeing here, we've also been optimizing it for VR, which comes along with its own set of challenges and is actually a really interesting part of our pipeline process. So, actually, while Philip's doing
This is
that,
a
would you mind
multi-man
running the
project.
mic back over
Here?
or Nick can run over?
Teamwork.
Yes. So Nick, so you and Robert oversaw the development of this area.
The art side, at least.
Yes.
Yeah.
So can you kind of give us the big picture view of how do you actually approach breaking down a space like this to recreate?
Good question. Because that does bring up a part of the pipeline that we sort of glossed over, which was just is breaking up Riven into a spreadsheet first. Hold on. The spreadsheet is the most important thing, at least in my mind, that we have. If you've got if we're just going to take an area like this from Riven, you've got dozens of textures, dozens of models, a whole bunch of different tasks that need to be done. The first thing you need to do is to break up the entire game of Riven into every single prop. That includes like every single like the maglev and submarine and stuff, they're the easy ones, but every single cave, every single platform, every single tree, rock, that kind of stuff, you have to get pretty granular. And so there is a document called Every Single Ladder Ever. Yes. And so we have we use a service called Airtable, which is just kind of a super spreadsheet, and it does list every single asset in the game and its current state. So it lists has a picture of it, so we all know what we're talking about, and its name. And sometimes we have to get a bit creative with names because, door_animation isn't... there's a lot of door animations, so we have to be kind of prescriptive but short. Then you've got who's working on it, and then you've got who's in charge of approving or reviewing that asset, just so we've got some quality control going through, especially if you've got, 10 artists all funneling work into the same thing. Oh, was that me?
That was me. Sorry.
Good. And so especially if you've got so many artists funneling work through, you need to be really on top of who's approving and who's reviewing stuff. And then you've got the modeling, texturing, animation, effects, and implementation of that. And so all of that together is sort of our master spreadsheet. And so the first thing to make a thing like that is you check the master spreadsheet and you see what assets need to be made. So I think in this one, you've got the platform, you've got the cave, you've got the maglev, you've got the maglev summoner, you've got the lighting, the bollards, and then you've got technically the staircase and stuff, but that's part of a different zone. And so, yes, and you've got the door and stuff. Spoilers. And so once you've got all of that set up, then you jump into camera matching. Am I talking too long? No, cool. All right. So you got camera matching. So this one is actually a really good example for camera matching because the lines are so straight on the dock. One great thing about Riven being made in a 3D program is that you know if a line looks straight, it probably is mathematically perfectly straight. Same with anything that's round. Like if you've got a like that circular, like the ends of the bollards there, you know those are perfectly circular because there's no way the original Riven team went in and actually modeled perfect. Like we've seen wireframes, it's NURB circles, it's fine. And so we use circles and straight lines to help triangulate and create what we call a block-in mesh, which is a really, really primitive, low-quality block-in of just the general shapes. So we would skip the bollards, we'd probably skip the maglev, we'd just have the platform where it drops off, the cave opening, and that's it. And then we put that in Unreal and we walk around it and we try to tell if there's any problems. Because often if there's a problem in camera matching, that's the only time you can catch it before it costs us hundreds of hours of work. Because if we textured the whole thing and then found out that the cave window doesn't fit the maglev, we're in a lot of trouble, and that has happened before. Yeah. And so once you've got the block in, then you can start separating that out into individual tasks, and then that goes to the modeling team and texturing team who do an amazing job making it look great, then all funnels back in to the engine.
Doors, we have one in this room.
We do. Sound by Hollister.
This little man was up until 3 in the morning doing just that. That little door piece did not work yesterday. Well done.
So as we mentioned, we've been developing this space in VR. And as Philip's walking around, you can see that we're using just traditional PC controls, right? But we know that in VR, some people are nervous about getting nauseous if they move around too much. So we have to be really thoughtful about how we have people locomoting around the world. Kyle, you spent some time thinking about this. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So yeah, recently I've started working a little bit on the programming. And the first thing I've been really working on is trying to get teleportation set up for VR. And no worries. So one of the hardest things about virtual reality is not really the pixel density or the head tracking or the controls of just like the physical controls, but really it's trying to make moving in a virtual world mesh with our perception of what we're seeing, because I know those of you who probably tried VR know exactly what I'm talking about, but those who haven't, when you move in VR, your body expects acceleration, and when that acceleration doesn't happen, your brain is not super happy with it, and it feels like you've been on a cruise ship. It feels you start getting dizzy. Some people are blessed with the ability of not having that. I am certainly not one of them, so I'm definitely a good person to be looking at this and trying to figure out good ways to move around. But thankfully, the Myst series demonstrates one of the most effective methods of fixing this problem, and that is nodal movement or teleportation. Either one. Those are two separate things. Nodal would be like the classic, you have your fixed points in Riven, and in this project, it'd be a really cool thing if we could actually get all the nodes to match up with the original Riven game. So you could play it in classic mode, so those with nausea and tendency towards motion sickness in virtual reality would not have to experience it, and they could also experience the game as it was way back in the day, but it would be in 3D and in real time, and you could move around if you wanted to and check things out, crouch down, look at an object, appreciate some texture, but for now what we have is just a basic teleportation model set up, and I guess just it's worth mentioning there are other ways of doing this. There's other ways of bypassing the human reaction to lack of actual inner ear movement on acceleration, and some games actually will blur out the peripherals and put in a grid that you can see, some reference that acts as a virtual floor, so that you feel like you have a reference frame, and that what you're looking at almost feels like a screen, but to the mind, you almost can't realize that the peripherals are blurred out. So it feels immersive, but yet you are not feeling motion sick. And I know this because my friend he was in Google Earth VR, which is a really fantastic program. Check it out if you get a chance. And he was like, I don't need any of this peripheral blurring nonsense, and just turned it off. And he had vertigo for a good 3 hours. So it works. It works, and you don't even know that it works. And that's the really good part about it. But yeah, we're just working on teleportation right now, and then nodal movement to come in the future. So thank you.
So I want to make sure that we have time for you guys to ask us some questions. Philip, was there anything else that we wanted to show here? Isn't that amazing to see that in real time? As I said, we're always looking to improve. So one thing I want to point out, and we'll get into the logistics in a bit, but as we've been talking a lot about, this has been developed in VR. For everybody who is here at Mysterium, we actually have a VR demo of this space for anybody who would like to try. So Kelly will share the details of how you can do that at the end, but we're really excited for you guys to experience it for yourselves. The sense of scale is something totally different when you get to see it in VR. All right, so we have a few minutes for audience questions. Do we have a mic for folks in the audience?
Just yell real loud.
Yeah. No, hang on. I need a runner.
We want to make sure people at home can hear your questions too.
Now, you've spoken about this elevator before, how it doesn't physically make sense in the space that's available. Have you figured out a way of doing that whole descent thing? Have you actually gotten that figured out in a visually satisfying way?
That's a difficult question. I don't know, because we have struggled with this for a while. Not just making it, because it already looks good, but making it make sense. And we did reach out to Robin, and he has told us some things about it, but I'm not sure we can talk about them. But long story short, I don't think it'll ever make physical sense if you look into it too much. Chains for anticipation was a term used. So yeah, it's a little Rivenese magic elevator. We do our best. Yeah. It's one of the few examples, really, of magic.
How are you handling the FMVs? How are you dealing with that? Because there was the whole places where sometimes you just like see a person in the things, but you can only really see them from like one angle or a few angles usually.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, FMV is full motion video, the video footage of actors that was used in the game.
Anyone want to take this one? Me again? Okay.
Nick is all the way here from Australia. We got to give
So
him
I
as
get
much
all the
Q&A
questions. Great.
time as we can.
All the really difficult ones, because, yeah. So we decided and when you say FMV, I assume you mean character specific. Yeah. We've decided to go with full real-time characters. And so there'll be no FMVs. So because we did explore ways to use the original footage, but there was just no way it was going to work. It would just look like a little 320 pixely person scaled up and then cropped down. It wouldn't look good. It would look, and in VR it would look 2D.
That's if we were using the original videos. If we were using the original videos from Riven.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And so with real-time characters, that's a whole host of other problems and expenses, and we're still working through those.
In the sound, how about the voices in that in terms of doing the sound?
So that thing Nick said about how it has a lot of problems that we're working through, that applies to the sound. Yeah, so the original sounds, the frustrating thing about those is, theoretically, we could just use the original dialogue and just match up the animations to it. Thing is, though, that all of the cutscenes that have, an FMV with a person talking also have sound effects, and that's why I'm here. I got it here.
Marty! You have it here?
Marty is officially the best person ever.
So the problem was before was that we couldn't split them out. I guess if Marty has the original sounds with the separated tracks, then to answer your question, that would be how'd we do it? Yeah. So thank you, Marty. There were a couple different things I was considering, but none of them would have been nearly as good as this.
Hi, I'm just wondering if Cyan has given you any original assets to work with?
Oh, good. This question again.
I'm not taking this one.
No.
It's okay.
That's technically not true, but no.
I was wondering about regarding the full motion videos, there's a couple of scenes in Riven where you have someone running away from you as you approach a scene. How does that pay out if you're using a full 3D model for that? Have you figured that out yet? Or? Okay.
So in any case, in any scenario where you see a character and if we let the player move around, they can sequence break or break immersion. For example, like the spooky girl in the jungle you find, who's there and then runs away. If you just chase after her and just follow wherever she goes, I mean, she's going to have to disappear somewhere. We'll be locking the player down in the same way that Riven did.
All right, since Cyan didn't give you any original assets, I'm assuming it's because it was all done in soft homage, and there were no existing assets available for anybody?
Yes.
Okay, and so my question then is, in order to gather the amount of data that you need, the reference data, did you go around through the game and take every single square inch of reference screenshot in order to rebuild this to make it as precisely close to the game as possible?
Yes, pretty much, except we use...
Yeah, I was just kind of curious if that's what you guys did.
Yes, that's exactly what we did.
Okay. All right, that's my question.
Okay, so it was automated. There is a program that will extract all of those renders out. So we didn't have to go through every single shot and screen cap that because
And we've built an internal team database to process all of those, not process, but to be able to navigate through all of those so we can instantly access without having to go through and replay the game every time we want to see something, which is really nice. We have a blog post about it on our site if you want to take a look at what that looks like.
What percentage of the design team do the 6 of you represent?
The number of people on design is always in flux, so it's hard to say exactly what that means.
Relatively, though.
Over time,
I'd say like a third to a quarter, probably.
We've had maybe, I think, about 60 people overall. That's never been at any one time. I think we have about 15 or so active team members at the moment. But active can range from sort of turns up for an hour once a month to check in and share an asset, or constantly chatting in Mattermost. So yeah.
The Starry Expanse team has shown previews from all 5 islands of Riven. Have you done any work yet on 233 or the Rebel Age?
Yes.
Any elaboration there?
We have showed 233 extensively before at Mysterium 2015, I want to say. Yeah.
Yep.
And so that area is one of our more complete areas because it's such a small, constrained, and really good looking area. We spend a lot of time working on our pipeline in there, making sure that is sort of baptism by fire, like making sure that we got it right the first time. Yeah.
Forgot about that. Don't know why.
That's okay.
Regarding Tay, we don't talk about Tay.
Tay's a secret.
Kelly, is the presentation still up? Do you know? I don't think so. So I want to be respectful of all of your time. We're about to head to lunch. 5 minutes? Oh, okay, great. We have time for a couple more questions.
All right. Are you going to be adding any of the content that Cyan cut from the original Riven?
Do I have to keep answering questions? I feel like I'm taking over. I mean, I can answer it, but
Plans are still being planned.
This is actually something that we talk about a lot internally, right? Is how much do we, as accurately and almost mathematically as possible, recreate the original game and only the original game, and how much do we try and make it either what we kind of remember, what we all remember it being. This is true when, for example, when we're recreating spaces in VR and need to adjust the scale. So even if it's not scientifically, mathematically precise, it still feels the same as it did in 2D, right? So, and trying to figure out if there's anything additional to add. For an example that we've talked about before, is the cone gun. I was also going to add in the submarine, for example, on Jungle Island, you never see the seat where you're sitting, right? But if you're in full 360 space, you can actually turn around and look at it. And so we needed to be able to recreate that as best we could based on what we thought it might look like. So those are some really interesting design challenges that we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Unrelated. Huh?
Well, I did have one more thing to say on that as well, because there are like little bugs in the game that I know probably everyone, very minor, that people would like to be like I know I myself would like to fix this one where when you're in the submarine and you go over to the gallows and you ride the lift up and then you take the ladder down, if you want to get back into the sub, you can't take the lift back down unless you leave the island and the sub resets to its original location. And it'd be cool if, little things like that, you could perhaps add tiny quality of life improvements in it. But but it would be, sacrilege, right? It's a sacred text. All right, that's all I have to say on that, though.
Yeah, one more?
So besides the sense of movement and all that, being able to look around, one of the advantages of converting it to real time is being able to go off the path potentially. Like in Real Mist, you could go walk in among the trees in an area you couldn't on Mist Island in the original. So I'm wondering what kind of plans you have for that. In particular, and you're going to think I'm joking, I'm dead serious here. Do you have any plans to make the player able to jump into that water right there? Am I the only one who wants to do that? Come on.
Generally speaking, the constrained environment of Riven is actually an asset, I would say, to the game design, because Riven is already huge. There's so many distractions already. If you can hop into the water and just swim anywhere, that's like major distraction zone.
And we want the game to also be, we want that new player experience to be preserved, because all of us have explored this to its fullest, right? And we want to explore all the nooks and crannies that we couldn't access before. But for people who are experiencing Riven for the first time, and there will be a lot of people who will be doing that with our version, we want to make sure that they have that curated, guided experience that they were designed for.
It can also break some of the puzzles if you can jump in the lake and boiler island without actually like going through the proper puzzles to actually open that. Like, you know, yeah, that can cause other problems. So, I mean, I imagine there might be some added, but it's not like you can go anywhere you want. So, is that fair? Okay.
So I think that is an awesome note to end on.
Well, do one more.
Do one more? Okay.
One more. Let's do it. Let's do it.
I'm already over here.
Okay.
It's actually a fairly short one. Which prop have you loved working on so far?
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, for each of us. Okay. Well, for me, it would be Gen's pipe. I had a lot of fun with that model, and I actually 3D printed one and painted it on the prize table. It's back there. Oh, yeah. That was me. Yeah, that was fun. Your turn.
I didn't actually make the maglev. I didn't model it or texture it, but I was lucky enough to animate it, and that was the greatest time.
The submarine was a lot of fun to program. We have good memories of coding it all up on a napkin on the plane.
I haven't worked on many assets in the game, but I did create one texture, which is the door to the hut. One of the huts on Jungle Island, the one that you knock on, that texture went through a lot of iterations. It was a lot of fun. I worked with Will on it.
Okay, so probably at least most recently, my favorite thing was we decided to have footstep sounds for the character. And since I couldn't really find any adequate footstep sounds for materials in Riven, because as you can probably imagine, the materials in a lot of those places aren't really things you can just look for online for stock, and I didn't want to do that anyway. So what I ended up doing was I took my high-quality recording mic, dangled it from a cord, and walked around on different surfaces. My favorite one is, thank you, is I needed a sound for walking up the elevator door, you know, when it comes down in Starry Island. And it's made of metal, but it's wood on the inside. So what I did was I took my creaky wooden floor, I took a baking tray, put on my shoes, and walked over the baking tray, and it sounds like clanking on wood with creaks. Thank you.
Step over the glass.
Right, except, hey, I consider that.
It's hard to top some really good Foley work. It's always really cool to hear about. Literally hear about. Ha ha ha. But for me, honestly, just working on the movement in VR is really fun as well, just because I want to experience Riven in VR, as I'm sure many of you do, and I also don't want to feel sick while doing it. So that's what I've enjoyed working on.
Awesome. Thank you all. There are three quick things that I want to cover. First is our website is starryexpanse.com. There you can have links to all of our different social channels. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, and special shout out to our Discord server, which Hollister started, which in the short time that it's been around has amassed nearly 1,000 members, which we're super excited about. All right. That's number one. Number two, Kelly, can you talk about the logistics for the VR demo?
We have 2 stations set up in the Clearwater room, which is the other room by registration desk, kind of in the lobby area. You probably saw me fiddling around with and screaming at my computer. So the room is not open all the time. Please check the schedule for the VR playroom. That's what that is. We're going to have 2 stations, maybe more. I know I've talked to a couple of you about more stations. Anyway, there's 2. And then we're going to bring you in groups of like 4 or 5. We're still working on logistics of that because there's also autographs happening at the same time. So please don't crowd that room, guys. Please play nice. And then anyway, so.
Awesome.
Yes, do the thing.
Really quick, just going off of what Iman said about the Discord server, I know there were a lot of questions we didn't have time to get to.
Yeah.
We have an entire Q&A channel there, and we have a lot of active team members that are happy to answer your questions. So there you go.
Great point.
And we're here, so,
Yeah,
even though we have to
you can
break
come
for
talk to
lunch, come find us and ask questions.
Absolutely. All right, and then number 3, we have one more announcement that we are really excited to share with you, but you're going to have to wait until tomorrow to hear about it. So stay tuned, and we'll have something else to announce tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.